this is the first webinar which will hopefully form part of a series talking about development within Exeter and linking to the Liveable Exeter programme, and also just providing an opportunity for discussion in the city amongst people who are involved in shaping the future of the city and who have a personal interest in the city in terms of either being a place to live or to work. Just a little bit about Liveable Exeter. Liveable Exeter is the city's transformational housing programme, seeking to deliver up to 12,000 new homes over the course of the next 20 years, but also fundamentally looking to deliver successful outcomes for the city relating to sustainable transport, active travel, and effectively communities, happy, healthy, successful communities which make the best and the most of what the city already has and connects to our fantastic amenity value that surrounds the city as well. So this webinar today, as I say, is hopefully going to be the first of a series. It's focused very much around placemaking and what the opportunities for the city are, particularly in a post-pandemic landscape. And we're very, very lucky today to have a very experienced and great panel to help us talk through this issue, drawn from all sorts of specialisms, I would say, within the city and within the built environment sector. So in a moment, I will turn to each and ask them to introduce themselves. But just briefly, we have Clodagh Murphy from Exeter Chamber. We have Tony Fisher from Lambert Smith Hampton. We have Frazer Osment from LDA. And we have Georgina Saville-James from Trowers and Hamlins. So Clodagh, if I could perhaps please turn to you first and just ask you to say hello to the group and introduce yourself fully.
Yeah, thank you, Richard, for inviting me to be here today. I'm Clodagh Murphy, as Richard said. I've lived in Exeter since 2006. I've got 3 children, so I live in the city. I live close to the city centre. I work locally, and I am chair of the Chamber of Commerce. And certainly over the last 12 months, as a chamber, we've been doing an enormous amount of support and helping local businesses as we've come through the pandemic as is, and going forward as well.
Thanks, Clodagh. And Tony?
Thank you, Richard. Tony Fisher. I'm head of offices for Lambert Smith Hampton, Exeter. I cover off all commercial aspects through the southwest, but based in Exeter. Previously, I was head of office agency across the United Kingdom for both Chesterton, if those that can remember Chesterton, and subsequently Lambert Smith Hampton. So I spent the past sort of 37 years doing offices across the UK. For the last 3, so I'm the newbie on the call, I've been working in Exeter, a place that I've become very fond of, and something that I perhaps should have done some 6 or 7 years ago. So I'm a newbie, I'm a relocator, which gives me an insight into Exeter. Offices in my DNA, but I now cover off all commercial aspects through the southwest.
Thank you, Tony. And Frazer.
Hi there, Richard. Thanks for the opportunity to talk today. I'm Frazer Osment. I'm the chair of LDA Design. So we're a national planning, environment and design business. We've got a studio in Exeter, but we've got 7 other studios across the country. I'm a Devon lad, come from North Devon. My knowledge of Exeter goes back a long way. I remember coming here as a kid, going through to Exeter cattle market as was. I remember playing Exeter Chiefs, you know, in the olden days when they were down in the county ground in the city. I had a few glory moments there, I think, in when they were still beatable by the likes of South Molton. I'm particularly kind of focused in my kind of professional life, I suppose, on placemaking and delivery, so about sort of making change happen. And I've been involved now, I think, working in Exeter and working on projects in Exeter for probably the best part of 20 years.
Fantastic. Thank you, Frazer. And last but not least, Georgina.
Thanks, Richard. It's great to be here. So I'm Georgina Saville-James. I'm a property lawyer, essentially, but there's much more to it than that sounds. I work for Trowers and Hamlins, who are an international and a national firm, but we have a large office based in Exeter. In fact, it's our 2nd largest office out of all the offices. I have lived here since 2004, but I am a Devon lass as well. I grew up in Plymouth. I know Exeter fairly well. In terms of property law, what I would say is it's much more than that. Fraser, I kind of agree with you. You know, placemaking is really key to this. I specialise in residential work, but that's residential developments, it's residential portfolio acquisition, it's placemaking at its best, really. It's looking at building communities, not just houses. And at Trowers, we are passionate about what that means and what the real estate sector means. And I'm really pleased. I've kind of, as I say, been based in Exeter since 2014. I'm head of our real estate practice in Exeter, and property work is what I do and love.
Fantastic. Thank you, Georgina. Thank you all. Fantastic introductions. And what I'd like to do now is sort of move on really to the questions. So I will just quickly hide myself, and then we shall start in earnest. So the first question really for all of you is very much a general question, and it's, I suppose, in light of where we find ourselves now in a post-pandemic landscape. But 2020 really was a challenging year, and in the most general sense, I was just interested to hear from each of you what the last year has, I suppose, led you to reflect on in terms of what you value in your surroundings, in terms of your city or the place where you live, and what really you think that points us towards in terms of the future and development in a post-pandemic landscape, and fundamentally placemaking as well. So Fraser, perhaps if I could start with you, and whether you have any particular reflections on your past year.
Yeah, sure. Really interesting question, Richard. It's something I've been thinking about a lot. I mean, as chair of LDA Design and with 8 studios across the practice, I think it's probably fair to say, you know, my pre-pandemic life was pretty hectic. It was traveling a huge amount. You know, I frequently didn't get back in time to sort of say goodnight to the kids. I spent a huge amount on the train. As a business, you know, we spent in our Exeter office something like £40,000 on train fares over the year. And I didn't really question it. You know, I was wrapped up in that kind of crazy world of rushing around doing the job and being tied into a way of life, you know, that I took as normal. And I think what really struck me, you know, fairly soon after, you know, we went into lockdown, was how absurd certain elements of that life was previously, and how much of what I was doing actually I didn't need to be doing at all. So the ability to talk and collaborate and so on through, you know, Zoom and Teams and so on. You know, I realized that we'd been locked into a way of life that actually was quite damaging in many respects, that you know, we weren't questioning. So I think in that respect there was a huge kind of wake-up call, and I really struggled to sort of see myself going back, you know, to that old way of, you know, working. You know, I have tea with my family every night. I walk the dog every morning. I've come to value the sort of streets and the spaces of my local area to an extent that I simply never appreciated. And although I've been here 20 years, I live in St James, you know, right at the heart of the city, really. I found places I didn't know. So it's been a hugely illuminating kind of period, I think, in many respects. And, you know, very many aspects of how I now live, I don't want to give up on. But of course, I've also recognized that life is about social interaction. It's about meeting the team. It's about spending time over a table with a fat felt pen working out what design needs to be, you know, for me. And you know, it's been really sad that we can't do that. And you know, so I'm desperate to re-engage now, I think, with kind of life as I know it in terms of a social endeavor. But in terms of kind of a way of life and demonstrating that we can live in a way that's lower carbon, less impact, you know, really positive. I think it's been a hugely learning experience, you know, for me personally. I've been very fortunate. I don't know anyone who's been adversely affected by COVID, of course, and therefore, you know, I'm in a fairly privileged position in that regard. So I'm very fortunate there.
Frazer, I would just add, I think all of us feel very glad that we live in the Southwest. You know, if you look at, you know, COVID-19 infection rates, death rates, hospitalizations, the Southwest have performed particularly well. And I think we're all grateful of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I would echo Frazer in terms of I now know my neighbourhood far better than I ever did before, but in a really nice way. There are streets that I now enjoy walking, running, you know, taking the children on and appreciating just all of those bits. And I think particularly through the early parts of the summer, I noticed the shift in just how bright and how vibrant the colours were because of the lack of pollution, because we'd all been at home. And I've got a yearning to do everything that I can to make sure that we, you know, continue on the agenda that we're on around the green environment and all of that. Because you know, we are missing something, or there's definitely something lacking when we go back to all of the cars on the road that we've got right now. And it certainly made me appreciate so much more what we've got locally to us.
And Clodagh, is some of that just because we were in our environment more, and therefore, you know, as we went through sort of late spring, sort of, you know, April, May time, we were sitting in our gardens more because we happened to be at home. Whereas, you know, Monday to Friday, we weren't previously, as Frazer quite rightly says, you know, we were tearing around the country, sitting on trains, sitting in cars. And equally, at the weekends, there are other things that get in the way, the kids, the shopping, etc. And therefore, that downtime, just, you know, at 5:30, 5:45 to sit in the garden, whether it be a coffee or a tea or a gin, doesn't matter, but that being in that environment just seemed different to me. And therefore, you're right, your observation of that environment you're in is just so much greater.
With that 6:52 train on a Monday out of Exeter, which I think we've all done, and we've all done. You know, I don't think many of us have really missed that. And that doesn't mean that I don't want to get back to going to London and doing some of those things again. But actually being forced to just take a little bit of stock around the rushing around and the doing rather than the being it's definitely a benefit of the year that has gone.
Yeah, I think that time to reset, which is what I've valued most, has been just so important for everyone, you know, that. And also I think, you know, pre-COVID there had been a massive shift in attitudes towards mental health, and that was starting. But I think actually what this last year has also shown is that, you know, well-being and mental health is still right at the top of the agenda and needs to be addressed, because what we've all found, I think, is green space and the opportunity to go out and, you know, just reconnect with places has been so significant. So I think that the kind of resetting opportunity and that kind of, I suppose, that reflection on what is important to us all, you know, what do we all find important, has just allowed us the time to really step back and look at that, which I think, you know, will lead to a positive change. But I completely agree, Frazer, at the beginning, you know, we've all missed people. Really what we want is that social interaction as well. So you know, can't wait to get back to some kind of structure, but obviously it's likely to look very different.
And Georgina, one of the other I suppose the challenges, particularly for someone like Frazer in this instance, is that because we're here talking about Exeter city centre and urban environment, you know, where people's perception of their need is, you know, forget 1-2 bedroom flats, it's 1.5, it's 2.5. Everyone now wants to have not a box bedroom, but a room that they can utilize as their office. And equally, they want outdoor space. You know, that mental well-being is, you know, those people that are living in 1-2 bedroom flats on the 12th floor in an urban environment with no outdoor space, you know, those people have really suffered the last 12 months. You know, going forward, how do we then, in a limited in terms of land and, you know, and I say that urban environment, how we close that circle on giving people the aspiration they desire, to give them outdoor space where we haven't got a lot of it anyway, and 2, giving them the opportunity to work from home. And as I say, you know, the 1.5, 2.5, you know, 3.5, we've all heard this over the last sort of 6 months, where people are saying, you know, if we're working from home, I want a dedicated environment. You know, not me. I'm sitting at the end of my dining room table, which is not great for me. I mean, physically, it's not great for me. But it's not how we want to live anyway. Not permanently. It's fine for a short period of time. So I think the challenge to someone like Frazer is how we close that circle on bringing all those new views together.
And this is the really interesting link back to the Liveable kind of program, isn't it? Because you know, in a sense, you know, what it's shown us is that we've actually neglected to think enough about the nature of our streets and our spaces and the quality of the environment that we experience when we walk out the front door, because actually we're just rushing out the front door to get the train, or we're rushing the kids off to school, and we've not thought, well, you know, what is the quality of life for someone who's, you know, living on the 10th floor of a block of flats, you know, beyond, you know, the kind of slightly consumer lifestyle we've created for them. And I think what COVID has done is it's really put a huge emphasis back onto quality of environment and the ability to access nature and the ability to move without the need to drive cars, the local services that we offer. And it's fascinating. I think at the start there was a lot of talk in the media about the way in which the whole environmental and sustainability agenda was just going to get ditched as a result of this because of the need to kind of reinvigorate economic growth. But I don't think that's happened. You know, I think in many ways it's been re-emphasized, which is hugely positive, really.
Yeah, and I have to say, I find myself now consciously thinking, if I need to go into town, or I'm walking, I'm purposely not touching the car. So I think it's become more acute in our thinking, and I think it is at everyday level that's why we need the changes, some of these changes to happen.
Yeah. I think we've also been, sorry, Clodagh, go on. I think we've also been really lucky in terms of looking at Exeter. You know, Exeter's a small city in comparison to other cities. You know, we're all facing the same dilemmas about how things are going to change and what matters to us and how we're going to bring kind of growth and prosperity back into our cities and what that means for people. And we've been looking at Trows. We've done a campaign recently, and in fact, Richard has been part of this, looking at, you know, what do people in Exeter and our other cities where we're based, but what do people in Exeter view as kind of being prosperous to them? And surprisingly, green space came out fairly low, but we think that's because in Exeter there's so much green space and opportunity to move around the city centre and get out to the beach, get out to the moors and the countryside. That's probably why it fared kind of less than, say, kind of Birmingham, Manchester and London. But, you know, and I suppose if we look at the way that we're all living, we do have less kind of high-rise buildings down here. So I think the kind of dynamic of our city is different to others. So I think we can kind of rejoice in that a little bit. But obviously, you know, there's still lots to do and lots to look at to change.
And Georgina, the point there is, and you're spot on, but planning for the future and planning for those that vision and those needs, and particularly in respect of what Frazer's seeking to achieve, you know, we've got the ability to do that. You're right, we don't have a height in terms of the city. We do have green space, but it's how we provide for that over the next 10 to 15, 20 years.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that's quite interesting, how communities have come together, and then the recognition, I think, from all of the different areas, that actually community is an incredibly important part of where we live, because actually it was those smaller communities, whether it was a single road or whatever it might be, where you know, WhatsApp groups were set up to make sure that we were supporting those who were, you know, isolated and alone versus those who had families and those who could get to the shops and those who couldn't. And okay, it's community with the small c, but actually it's incredibly important in terms of where we live. And I think certainly in this last year, I've got to know my neighbours, who I would never know because I was in and out and you were rushing to everything. You know, we came out and clapped every Thursday evening, and we got to know each other as a result of that, and then came out to sing happy birthday to each other at different points in the term. And those things are incredibly important in terms of how we build out this place and what it looks like and what it feels like.
I think for me, the one surprise that I've completely found over the last 12 months, you know, I would hold my hand up. I am what everyone on this planet would call a petrol head. I'm car mad, both whether I own cars, Formula One, etc., attending Grand Prix. I'm a complete petrol head. Do you know what? I did not miss driving my car in the last 12 months. Why are we so born to it? I can walk to my local town. It's 2.5 miles down the lane. That's what I've been doing. And I didn't miss driving that car, despite the fact that I like driving and I'm a car guy. But yeah, didn't miss it at all. If I didn't have to get in it for the next 4 weeks, it wouldn't bother me.
Yeah,
amazing.
And that's what's fantastic about Exeter, isn't it? And Liveable as well, because the idea of placemaking and bringing people together in a relatively small city, but as we expand, I know Liveable, is looking at the connectivity between those places and making sure cycle routes are available, that there is a kind of connection between each area, and that's going to be key, I think, moving forward.
I think the other thing I've really appreciated is that I think some of our small businesses have responded really well. I sometimes, for my weekly thrill, I will sometimes just walk across to Magdalen Road and, get in there, and, all of the shops that, the restaurants have turned themselves into takeaways and so on, and delivering such a fantastic kind of service with a smile. And it seems to me, there are some real successes and sort of some energy coming through from the bottom up in terms of the appetite of local people to create businesses at the moment, which I think is something we definitely shouldn't lose sight of. The last thing we should do is think we need to get back to normal by simply filling, all of the vacant space that's created by, business as usual kind of, businesses. Let's actually create the investment space for those entrepreneurial energy people, of whom there are kind of increasing numbers, I think, in Exeter, to really fly. Actually, I think that should be a really overt challenge for us all.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So there's no vacant properties on either Magdalen Road, 4th Street, and Gandhi Street. So all of the secondaries, what we would perceive to be the secondary streets in Exeter versus the High Street, there's no vacant properties there. So they're all full. And actually, we've seen the investment going in from some of the, the Ivies coming to the High Street. So there is, the feedback and the sentiment from the retailers, both small and large, at the moment is actually quite buoyant. It's quite positive. They're looking forward to getting open, and they're going to be opening with new season stock versus old stock. And they've got a really flexible approach. I think you're dead right, Fraser, in terms of how they've pivoted. Also, they've got a growth mindset now around how they're going to approach the next 6 and 12 months. There will be a bit of trepidation in there for sure, but actually they've got a real can-do attitude. And I think the other thing I've noticed, particularly across the business community, is the resilience. We went through that awful period at the beginning where there was a huge dip, and we were all in a little bit of panic mode. But as we've come through it, actually the resilience and the sense of confidence and self-confidence across business owners in and around the city and the region is actually really high. And I think that will really stand us in good stead.
Clodagh, just to put some colour on that, because obviously I run an agency in the commercial heart of Exeter. Approximately 60 to 70% of all the inquiries, whether it be on our digital platforms or off the telephone in the traditional way, are retail or food and beverage. I mean, okay, traditionally it's always been an entrepreneurial sector of the marketplace, but we just don't have enough units to offer at the moment. Now, okay, they may be at rents that current landlords would start to blink at, but the demand is certainly there.
That's so positive, isn't it? That's brilliant, because I was going to use the word resilient because it is so key to kind of, I think, how everyone's addressed this, and the opportunity to kind of be creative and think about doing things differently. And Tony, that's so positive to hear that the inquiries that you're getting are so significant, because that's coming out of this, certainly in terms of the residential market, there's got to be confidence that it's there, that there are buildings there, that we're designing things people want to live in. I'm not a designer, so I say that kind of flippantly, but people are very keen to know what's going to be there, and that there is confidence in the market. And it's the same for the commercial and business sector as well. So that's hugely positive.
All I can say, Georgina, is that as agents, we're like meerkats standing on the mound, sniffing at the wind, as it were. And actually, we did, and this stop-start arrangement hasn't been easy for us. And we came out of the original first lockdown. Things started to motor after the summer holidays. It started to pick up very quickly. We then went into our second lockdown. We came out of that. We only had 10 days before we had the Christmas shutdown anyway, and that would be a shutdown period for us regardless. And we've come out of Christmas, New Year into our third lockdown. However, in the last 4 weeks, the light bulb has been switched on. Sentiment, and property is always a sentiment, whether it be us as individuals, shall I move and do I feel confident to move, etc. It's the same for businesses. Clodagh and I speak all of our lives has been dealing with businesses. A business has a huge cost in a relocation or a move, whether it just be next door. And therefore, do I feel confident about the business going forward? So that's a sentiment thing. The light bulb is on.
Without a shadow of a doubt. And the recent survey we ran post-budget and post-lockdown restrictions notifications is that the sentiment is buoyant. So nobody has responded to say their sentiment is negative. It was 100% positive, and then it was a variant of I'm really positive, or it'll be a bit tough, but we'll get through it. So the sentiment is definitely in the right direction. And then you look at, there's, I think the stats I had last week, there's more than 3,000 jobs being advertised across Exeter at the moment. So there's 3,000 roles out there. Now that's down on what it would have been 12 years ago, or 12 months ago. 12 months ago, it was about 4,000 jobs. So 3,000 roles, but bearing in mind that the high street is pretty much closed. And that there are organisations that at the moment will be waiting until they can get back into the office to do some of the recruitment. But that's quite positive with those sort of numbers out there.
And Clodagh, not just the retailers who take on more staff very quickly, the food and beverage market, and of course, we have an abundance of that in Exeter, principally off the student market. That will flick on very quickly as well.
Well, absolutely, and we've seen 11 retail outlets have shifted into the food and drink space in the last 12 months. So they've gone from being retail outlets into food and drink, and you can see coming out of this, we're all going to want to get out and socialise. We're all going to want to get out and spend time with people. Right. So that's positive for the city centre in terms of drawing them in. And I think our challenge is going to be making sure that the change in behaviour that's happened out there to online shopping actually shifts back into people getting out and spending time in the city that is in Exeter. And that's not just about the shops, that's about the cultural offering that we've got, which, is a big part of what the Place Board is looking at. And it's around all of that whole citywide experience, so that people, when they do and have that enjoyable, holistic view of what they can do and how they can spend their time.
Yeah, Clodagh, it's about making Exeter a destination.
Absolutely, place to go.
Yeah.
Tony, you took the words right out of my mouth.
Yeah, there we go. Well, Georgina, it's something that we're looking with other city authorities and county councils are looking to do that intervention. And I sit and I read so much mainstream media rubbish, and I'll bite my lip and just say rubbish about the death of the high street, or utter rubbish, etc. And really, I don't know where these people spout or can spout this sort of negativity from. The reality is that we will change, we'll evolve. I already mentioned earlier on that retailers, food and beverage, they're entrepreneurial on their style. And when one falls away, one will backfill, etc., with a different offering. It might be chicken this week, it might be steak next week, it doesn't matter what it is. What I'm saying is that entrepreneurial market, in respect of the intervention from the destination, whether we shop as we did shop 15, 20 years ago, probably not. But there is still the ability to shop. Now, I might not want to spend 5 hours shopping. I might spend an hour and then I'll have a coffee. Then I'll do some more shopping. I might want lunch. I might want to do something else. We have obviously the new leisure centre coming into the city centre. Fantastic idea of pulling people in. I'll take the kids swimming. You go and do this. It doesn't matter what it is. The destination is to come to Exeter to do a number of different things that may not be to come and shop in the traditional way.
And I think that's one of the things that the pandemic has and will have shown everyone, won't it? There's been this reset that we talked about at the beginning with everyone's priorities and values. So I think, the high street was suffering pre-pandemic because of all of the online facilities. And actually, what the last 12 months have shown us is that because people's mindset and attitudes and values have shifted, you're quite right, Tony, people won't be just coming to the high street to shop. It will be about making a destination, making it about arts, culture, you know, heritage. We've got some amazing buildings in the city centre which draw people in. Now, you know, I think for a lot of people, those kind of places like the cathedral, the quay, you know, they're places of stability and calm. And I think there's an awful lot that will bring people back. And but I agree, I think, you know, the high street in its kind of old traditional sense has gone. But I think people will see the change far easier now because, as you say, people want to come out and socialise and do far, you know, do far greater things.
I think the interesting thing now is going to be how we catalyse this moment, you know, to also deliver on the other objectives, you know, of Liveable, because actually, you know, at the heart of it is kind of homes and making it a more livable, you know, city. And I think the interesting thing is going to be how we bring together those two benefits of, if you like, the environment that we've all cherished and got to know better, you know, the wonderful environment of Exeter and its surrounds, and, you know, this buoyancy that you're describing in the business kind of sector, and the fact that the city centre is going to change, but it's not going to change for the worse. It's just going to change to something that is more experiential and potentially, you know, more exciting and more people focused. And how does all that come together to make it a place where people actively want to invest, to build homes, to create affordable homes, to have great quality of life right in the heart of the city? Because I think, you know, that to me is kind of one of the big nuts that we've got to crack in Exeter in terms of kind of achieving that very bold aspiration of Liveable, which is, you know, the 12,000 homes, you know, within the city over the next 20 years or so. And, you know, it seems to me that, you know, Exeter really can be one of the most livable places. So, you know, and there should be a real appetite and energy from the people who build some of the really good quality kind of homes and stuff to do that in the city centre or around the city. And I think that's going to be quite important to frame up, you know, Liveable as a real attractive investment proposition, I suppose.
That's really interesting, all of you. I mean, I think it's interesting just listening to the themes that have come out recurrently through that discussion in terms of reflections on the past year, and what you've all drawn out in different ways and repeatedly actually is the point about amenity, about the point of having more time over the course of the past year to reflect and think about what's important. I think community came out quite strongly in that conversation as well, and the point, a couple of times the word resilience came up, and the fact that there is resilience in the city, there is confidence in the city, and all those things are really, I think, important. And as you were just saying, Fraser, in terms of the relationship back to Liveable and how we think about Liveable as a placemaking tool to build on those existing strengths and what development therefore needs to queue up, thinking forwards. And you again just mentioned a word a moment ago which I thought was a very significant word in the context of placemaking or place shaping and thinking about the future, which is obviously about experience, which does really draw on that point of amenity and to a degree community as well, and just making sure that we fully sell the assets that the city has. I completely agree with you. I think the importance of the city centre moving forward can't be underestimated as a centre for culture, as a centre for retail, as a centre for homes, and as a centre for commerce and business. And clearly, you know, development in the city in itself is going to bring pressures to the city. With 12,000 new homes is a significant number, clearly. But I was just thinking, you know, it would be interesting to hear from you all as well in terms of, you know, again, what do you think the features of development will be in the coming months and years, and how can we, I suppose, deliver in light of the pandemic successful new space and place? And Tony, I was going to turn to you perhaps first on this, just to say, obviously, what we have talked about as well is how, you know, we've been forced in the past year almost to be away from the city and perhaps away from our normal places of work. But how is this point about experience going to play into office development particularly, and what's it going to mean for the office sector? But also to all of you, I suppose, you know, you've alluded to it already in terms of how the city centre will develop and evolve in the coming months and years. But what would you point towards key opportunities and key things we can do to really build that critical mass and that opportunity for the city moving forwards? So So Tony, I'll start with you for quite a challenging question, but I'm sure you'll have clear views on it, no doubt.
At this point, Richard, I really wish I didn't ask him that. Unfortunately, can I just circle back before I answer that question, Richard, on something that Frazer said earlier on about Magdalen Street? He referred to the sort of, coffee house and sort of patisseries. What he really meant was the excellent wine shop that's on Magdalen Street. We're all sitting here going, he's not going for a coffee. He's been to the wine shop.
Caught me.
Busted. Completely
We've
busted.
only just met.
Look, I think just as a point, with any city centre and where we're looking at, creating a centre that is vibrant, where people live, etc. Don't forget where people live, work. Okay, so creating that employment is very important. If you go back, 25, 26 years ago and look at what Nottingham City Council did with the lace market, etc., and trying to attract people in. We're pushing everybody out. Let's bring them back in, etc., so that they can live and work and they can walk to work, etc. Now, okay, Exeter didn't have Article 4 over the central business district, and there has been a flight. Let's be honest, there's been a flight over the last 15 years of businesses to the periphery of Exeter, and we've backfilled those with student living, whether it be hotels, conversions, PD, whatever it might call. That's unfortunate. But if you're going to have a case for living in the centre, you also have to provide employment opportunities for those people. That's the first thing. Now, obviously, in terms of offices, my specialist subject, etc., for the want of a better phrase, white-collar workers tend to spend money in the microeconomy. So they may not even live in Exeter, but they'll go and buy breakfast. They'll go and buy lunch. They'll go and do some convenient shopping. They'll go for dinner afterwards, etc. So that has huge benefits as well. So offices, in this instance, very important to the fabric of centre living, because it provides employment, it provides money into the local GDP, etc. So it feeds itself. Okay, that's the start point. We started the discussion about our own experiences for COVID-19, and I very much endorse what's been said about work practices, my own work practices, and how I see life. But there are three fundamental things that you cannot get away from in respect of office accommodation and office occupiers. One, people that are in an office environment are more productive. Two, they are more creative. Three, the business itself has a lower churn rate because there is a sense of belonging amongst their employees. So their churn rates are traditionally between 5 and 10%, okay, which is sustainable. Beyond 15%, and that business is starting to have problems. It's either having to increase its salary base to attract people, etc. And there's the disruption of people churning. So that over the last 50, 60 years, there's been enough surveys that show that all three of those elements, one of the reasons why, because I have to give seminars, etc., the easiest way to look at it, I think we're all old enough on this call, etc., to say 20 years ago, I've got a 2-week contract in London. I phone Regis as the supplier and say, hello, I've got a 2-week contract. Can I go to your Northumberland Avenue address for 2 weeks? Of course, Mr. Fisher, tick the box on the services you would like us to provide. And I would tick the box, can you answer the phone? Da, 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 da. I arrive on Monday morning, they show me to a little glass box with a desk and a PC. There we are, Mr. Fisher, away you go. We'll answer the phones for you, etc. Now I go to that same operation. I get a credit card. It gives me access to their building. That's all. And I would sit at a large table with other people, and it could be us, 6 or 7. I have no relationship with you whatsoever. And all I do is sit next to you with my technical pack, etc. And away I go. That mere fact that I'm sitting next to someone, another human being, automatically makes me more creative, makes me more productive, etc. And that subconscious element to humans. So all of those things are factually correct. Okay, it is. So the death of the office, we won't work in offices anymore, is not likely to be the case. I think there are things that we will change for sure. I think Frazer made we all woke up to the fact that we don't need to get, and actually, Clodagh, for you, it was the 625, it was the 605 for Crew Kern for me. So, do I need to be on the 605, to London? Of course I don't, etc. do I need to even be at that meeting where we can do it through Zoom or Teams or whatever it might be? And so those work styles and work practices, the pandemic has sort of jolted us into, think out of the box, react differently, not just as I see my own space, but also how I conduct myself and how I conduct my business. And so I don't think that there'll ever be a falling back to the 8:36 routine, Monday to Friday, slavishly at our desks. There will be a loosening of that, whether it be 1 or 2 or 3 days a week, or even 4 days a week, but perhaps not working that 8:30 to 6. It might be 10 to 4 or whatever. We all now realize that we can operate outside of our fixed environments. So
I totally buy into those 3 points you made there, Tony. And I think the interesting thing, is for the next sort of decade and more is how we lever that kind of, importance of, creativity, collaboration, collective kind of action and stuff. And it strikes me one of the strengths about Exeter is there's a lot of people that are really open to working with each other and collaborating. I think that's one of the things I really, love about working here. And if you look at the challenges we need to face over the next, 10, 20, 30 years and more around climate and biodiversity loss, etc., lots of things. It's going to be people who collaborate and kind of find creative solutions that are going to be the people that thrive, I think, in the businesses that thrive. So there's a real question about how do you transform that into how you plan your city? How do you create your office space and your city centre environment in a sense? So you're almost creating a, culture of collaboration and collective action and, creativity as an inherent strength of the city. And I think that would be a really interesting conversation to come back to at some point, because
So I was going to say I'll probably step a step further and actually pull on the entrepreneurial spirit that we talked about earlier.
Absolutely.
How do we pull into that, the entrepreneurial spirit and the innovation that actually we've seen that we can then harness on and build forward on, because I think that will be quite a special place then to be.
Yeah.
What's interesting, Clodagh, is that what we've seen, admittedly in other much larger city centres, is where people have naturally filtered out and have got spare desks. They are inviting businesses to share their offices, not on a formal lease basis, almost sort of rent a desk, etc., so that they're actually inviting other companies to come and work with them in a collaborative style. Usually they are part of the wider family in terms of what industry or business they happen to be in, but that, so that sort of match up between similar organizations, or where there's a down chain or an up chain, etc. Well, we have 6 desks, you can certainly rent this. So that collaborative entrepreneurial spirit is joining together, where I certainly know one company where 1/3 of their desks are currently occupied not by their employees, by external companies that are renting 1 desk or 5 desks, etc. Now, okay, they are within their wider chain, etc. They are known to each other, but we might see much more of that going forward. There's one thing I do want to add on offices, which I'm going to be fascinated by, because through the last particularly last 30 years, it's all been about efficiency. And in fact, in the United Kingdom, we are the most efficient at occupying our office space in Europe by a country mile. Okay, so we've been designing the vanilla average 1 to 10 square meters. We occupy approximately 1 to 8, and we've been factoring in through the design process going down to 1 to 6. Now, obviously, that you have to be careful there, because, of course, once you get below 1 to 6, there is, finish to finish levels, and there's sort of, as Frazer would know, it's all about the air that we breathe and the quality of that air that we breathe, and you have to be careful. But you can see how we're starting to have smaller desks. Well, now, key there is, as we crawl out of this, debate amongst many occupiers is, maybe I shouldn't have that. Maybe I should actually have more space than I've got. Or where we've lost some people, we need to start pushing people out. So we need to be less efficient. So maybe the Scandinavians, who traditionally are about 1 to 12 square meters, maybe we should be more like them. So our own personal space is much wider in the office. So we're not all sitting on top of each other. That efficiency, which we've driven, etc., maybe we've been wrong. Something that, we always tell occupiers, all right, the best employers occupy the best buildings. They attract the best staff because they have a reputation of being the best employers. Yeah, and that is a truism, you know. And for most office-based companies, whether they be consultants, whoever they are, the majority, about 80 to 85% of their costs are actually their people. So their people are the most important thing. Property represents between 10 and 12%, etc. So it's, you know, and those occupiers, and you can see them around, will always attract the best staff because they occupy the best buildings and therefore they have that reputation. And I think that, you know, a number of office occupiers, and certainly stuff that we've been engaged in with corporates at the moment, I can't give names out, they're all looking to actually expand their arms, elbows out, etc., and say, have we got enough space? Maybe we should take the building next door or the floor upstairs, etc., because we need to spread our people out more. And I think that will be a result of COVID, that our physical environments will all be so much better.
And I can echo that. We've picked that up off a huge number of our members and businesses in Exeter looking to expand. So where everybody thought the office is dead, actually they want more space. And yes, it'll be flexible working. So there isn't an anticipation that it will go back to 5 days a week. But when people are in the office, they don't want to sit as closely to other people, and therefore, you know, more space is needed, or we won't reduce the space that we've got, even though we have less people in the office.
Yeah, and that sense of belonging, Tony, that you spoke about at the beginning, your kind of 3 points, and the sense of belonging is the big one that we're hearing from our kind of team. You know, we've got 130 people occupying a building, or previously were, you know, all successfully working at home, but that sense of belonging and needing to be somewhere and have a focal point to go into and develop that sense of culture for the organisation is going to be so key, isn't it? So redesigning that space to allow for that, but yeah, still embracing the kind of flexible nature of what we've all become used to.
And Georgina, it doesn't take much. You know, I did an acquisition back in 1993. It was a call centre, you know, as we all called them. That's the new buzzword, call centres, etc. And it was outside of Doncaster. Now, if you run a call centre and you're in the periphery of a town, you run 3 shifts, etc. But your demographic pool is no more than 6 miles from that call centre. So therefore you have a defined area because of the nature of people you're employing. And what we found was that, you know, and we all need to be educated, we acquired this and we paid the going rate, etc. But within very short order, we had a churn rate of 35%, unsustainable, etc. When we went to look why we had the churn rate, it was so simple. They had, let's just say, 250 desks. And I, as their employee, Mr. Tony Fisher, good morning, Tony. You've got your headset. Today you're on inquiries and you're on pod number 76. And I would go to pod 76 and I would be on inquiries, etc. The following day, obviously because they want to churn their staff, you're on accounts. So can you go to pod 123, Mr. Fisher? I go to pod 123. The change we made was that Mr. Fisher always went to pod 62. And 62 was his pod. It didn't matter whether he was on accounts one day, you know, inquiries the next, etc. That mere fact that he went to the same pod every day dropped the churn rate by nearly 60% overnight. Sense of belonging.
I was going to say, and also we're all creatures of habit, aren't we? As much as we kind of think we can work in that kind of very flexible way of paperless office, come in, work in one space. Yeah, a lot of us just like to have that sense of belonging and that sense of normality around us and structure, and it's the small things that give us that. So working at the same place is probably one of those.
And yeah. Georgina, what we will, as human beings, our subconscious will mean that actually, even though it's not my desk, I'm just a pod 62, I will personalize it to a certain degree, you know, and therefore that familiarity of that desk adds to it as well.
Yeah, it's fascinating discussion, you know, because you start to really get a sense of the potential of which, through the kind of Liveable program, we could really start to think about how we design, if you like, engineer the kind of you know, the environment of the city to be this, you know, fantastic workplace, this fantastic work environment in which, you know, the collaboration and the creativity and the entrepreneurship is actually enabled in a very precise way, not leave it to chance. You know, And just hearing you talking and the amount of expertise that just is in this little room, it just makes you think incredibly positively about the way if we can galvanize the energy of the people that are already in the city, we can find some amazing solutions to do some of these things over the next 10 years.
Yeah, and Fraser, just to pick up also on coming full circle on the opportunity, I think also another aspect of COVID will be the death of the commute. What we all talked about, whether it be the 625, the 605, to the regional centre. So what businesses are looking at now are decentralisation, going to regional hubs and then the second tier sub-regional hubs. So, we will not have 90% of our workforce in London. We'll push them across and we'll have 20% in Bristol, 10% in Exeter, and we'll go 20% in Birmingham, 10% in Leicester, etc. So this regionalisation of the UK, particularly in terms of UK corporates, will happen, so that we employ our people closer to where they live, and that we're not asking to commute or super commute, and of course, London's always had a gravitational pull, from huge geographical distances, people commuting every day. I don't think anyone wants to go back to sitting on a train or sitting in a car for an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours, etc. And I think so this regionalisation where you've got regional hubs, what we call hub and spoke, etc. And you've heard the expression, etc. So we'll have a UK office in central London, but it will be front of house. We'll regionalise and then have sub offices off that. I think that will, for most of them, the corporates, some of them already have that. I think there will be an expansion of that policy personally. But the problem is that at the moment, Exeter City Centre is not even 2 million built stock. So it's not a very big playground. And in that, all you've got is Broadwalk House, which is being refurbished at the moment by Castleforge, only providing about 12,500 feet of availability, and Longbrook House, which will be vacated by HMRC on New North Road on the back of Central Station. Those are the only two buildings that are fit for purpose. It's not a lot of square footage. And we can't pour water and just there we are. It will take, with planning, construction, anywhere between 36 and 48 months to react, and that's our challenge.
And the phrase I heard yesterday, which I guess gives me the optimism and the hope around Exeter, is that the conversations that are happening are actually, we're having conversations across, so between different sectors, between different groups, rather than just conversations that are going up and down and silo based. So, we've got, this conversation here, and then we've got broader conversations around what's going on with the cultural offering, and what's going on with the business offering, and what's going on with the public sector offering, and what the university doing, and what are the NHS doing, and all of those conversations and pulling those together, actually going back to Fraser's point about having a plan that actually helps us, because if we've got a plan and we've got a vision for what it looks like, then executing on that, even if it's taking 48 or even more months to do it in terms of spinning up some of this stuff, actually having a joined up plan will mean our chance of success is so much greater, and will mean that actually, not only do we have a fantastic place to live, but we've got fantastic jobs, and people can have, for me, one of my big drivers is being able to see line of sight. Somebody leaving university, they don't need to go to London. They can have a job down here, or they can go to London but come back to a job down here, and they can see line of sight to their first, second, third, fourth stage of their career, rather than in some cases where you get to a point where you want to move here, but you can only see line of sight to one job ahead of you or two jobs. We need to surface all of the opportunities that exist in Exeter and in the region, so that people can see, the fulfilling career and fulfilling life that they can have here.
Clodagh, the best example it's on a much bigger scale, admittedly, but the best example of that, of not only that forward planning, that sustained forward planning, i.e. it's not just a one-off for this year, for the next 5 years, it's keeping going, is actually Manchester. Now, Manchester, and one could argue about the mayor, setting all geopolitics aside, Manchester, okay, the Arndale shopping centre did need to be rebuilt after the bomb, etc. But if you look at what Manchester has done, it has made sure it has had a constant plan on what it was doing, living in the city, buying into universities, etc., making sure that these people who come to Manchester to be educated stay in Manchester, that the jobs are there for them. So you've got the redevelopment of the Arndale Centre as the catalyst to that. Then you've got Piccadilly Gardens. Then you've got Spinningfields, etc. Then you've got the Northern Quarter around Victoria Station, etc. Civic Quarter, which is currently going on at the moment. They've had a plan and they've rolled it out, which has meant that Manchester is now the second city for the United Kingdom. Yes, demographically, in terms of population headcount, Birmingham is still there, but no one in the commercial market sees Birmingham as the second city. It once was, but Manchester is now the second city. And in fact, Manchester, to the point, can rival London on many levels, etc. And that's the benefit of a 25-year plan that's been going on now, and it's been very impressive. They don't stop. They don't stop on their laurels. They keep going. And actually, one of my closest friends, his son went to Manchester, and where's he living? In Manchester. Don't live anywhere else.
And that's a really interesting point, Tony. And just again, listening to the conversation, I think a lot of what you've been covering here is around the nature of the place and the assets that the city has. And clearly a strong asset is around the spirit of collaboration and innovation. And clearly we're blessed to have such a strong university in the city as we do. And I was just thinking, listening to you all, the quote popped into my head from Bruce Katz and Julie Wagner about innovation. And the point that innovation in the past, an innovative economy, you needed to drive to a secluded research park and work away somewhere in isolation almost. But today it's flipped, and urban places are that walkable. Hyper-caffeinated is the phrase that always sticks in my mind, but that's probably because I drink far too much coffee. And this idea of the mashup, Tony, you used the words mashup, but more of an overlap between amenity, recreation, employment, and those facilitating those opportunities for collaboration is such a strong thing, isn't it? When I know in Bristol, Engine Shed was a fantastic facilitator for collaboration, and it led to so many opportunities and dynamic conversations. So I guess that sort of points us towards needing to facilitate that. And I suppose the question then becomes, if we can do those things, how does that translate through to the type of homes we're going to build, and what sort of features are they going to need to have, and how are we simply going to deliver on those for the broadest demographic? You mentioned the idea of graduate retention. Clearly, Exeter produces amazing graduates, and unfortunately, currently many of them leave, understandably. But how are we going to create a place that continues to deliver for existing residents, but also allows the future expansion and growth of the city from a residential dynamic? And Frazer, I guess you might have a view on that as well. And what do you think are the opportunities and equally the challenges, I guess?
Well, I suppose firstly, starting with existing residents. I mean, I think the whole premise behind the Liveable kind of proposition was it was about housing growth to deliver benefits for the citizens of Exeter, for the people of Exeter, both existing and those who will come. And I think that's really important. I think that's why there was very little kind of pushback on that, which was actually quite an ambitious plan, because I think people did understand that this wasn't just about delivering homes, it's actually delivering homes with a purpose, and that purpose was to make Exeter a better place to live. So, the central idea was that actually if we're delivering more homes, then we've got to find a way to capture some of the value of that, to invest back into the quality of our green spaces, our services, our streets, our spaces, and so on. So that needs to be absolutely central to it. We must hang on to that we're doing this for a reason. We're not just doing it to build more homes that don't deliver a suite of other benefits to the city. So that's key. I think the other one I'll just sort of pick off, I think we're in a society, I think at the moment, where, there is a kind of increasing distinction between those who have and those who don't. And I think in many ways, COVID has emphasized that even more, be it in terms of who's suffered the most, who's experienced the highest death rates, those who've had least access to good quality green space. So everything we need to do needs to have a lens of kind of social inclusion about it. So we wouldn't want to go on a journey to gentrify the city to make it a cool, trendy place to be for hipsters coming in from London, and actually forget that actually there's a lot of people in Exeter in need of better housing, at an affordable level. So that equally needs to be a very explicit thing that we need to recognise and think about how we achieve that. And I know, the council is thinking a lot about that at the moment. But then beyond that, I think we increasingly need to think about what sorts of places and what sorts of homes do we need to create in order to attract the people that we need for Exeter to be successful in the future. And I don't think we think like that very much, but actually, Exeter is increasingly in a sort of competition for talent. Those graduates who might otherwise be educated here and then zap off to London. Yes, you might think that's actually just a natural progression of what people do. No, it's not. It's actually, we've lost a bit of talent that we could have otherwise had. So what sorts of places, what sorts of environments, what sorts of homes do we need to be creating to make it, attractive? What sorts of homes would attract a CEO in a tech startup in Cambridge to think, do you know what, I fancy going to Exeter and I can get a great house, a great home, I can create a great business and create local jobs, but actually I can do it in Exeter where I'm close to some of the best beaches in the world. Those sorts of things need to be more explicit. So we need to be much more clear, I think, about creating the sorts of homes we need to meet the sorts of needs we have. And those range from very strongly around, meeting the needs for those who have been left behind, but equally it's about meeting those needs to make sure that we get the sorts of investment we need as well. So it's about being very, very deterministic about what we're trying to achieve here, not leaving it to chance, and that's why I think, the public sector has such an important role to play in guiding this.
Frazer, you mentioned something which resonates with me in respect of what others are doing to retain their graduates as they leave. And if we think that Exeter is unique in being a nice place to live that has students, then we are blinkering ourselves. Every city in the country is doing exactly this at this time. They're looking to how we come out of COVID, how that looks, but equally where we've got a strong university base, and we have 2 here in Exeter, but we're not unique in that, etc. And therefore how they do it. So this conversation is being replicated through the major cities, 2nd tier and 3rd tier cities, about how they rejuvenate their city centres, using this as an opportunity, as a catalyst for that, whether it be intervention, and I would support intervention, or whether we can leave it to the free market, etc. But all of those things are being debated now, they're being discussed now. So, Exeter is not alone.
No, and one of the things, Frazer, you touched on there, which I was going to pick up on, is the affordability issue. Because, in all of this and looking, I suppose, at growth, which is fantastic, there is a challenge there for any city. But I think particularly for us as well, in terms of the, maintaining affordable housing and maintaining good options for people to have, particularly at a time when lots of people, lots of businesses looking to relocate, because as we said, Southwest is a really good place to be. Why not base yourself here? I think the difficulty that is firstly, it draws in trapped talent. That's great. That's not a difficulty. That's brilliant. So you've got this kind of dichotomy, haven't you? We want to draw in talent, we want to retain people, but where are we going to put everyone, and who can afford to be here? And those communities that already exist here are finding themselves, and might find themselves, priced out of the market because we are attracting more people to relocate. So I think there is a balance somehow that we've all got to strike, and Liveable has got a challenge in that. 12,000 new homes, fantastic, and of course a large majority of those will be affordable. I work with a lot of housing associations who will take a lot of the development opportunities on these kind of growth areas, forming kind of in Exeter and just outside of Exeter. But the affordability point is key, I think, as well, that we've got to consider in all of this, how we're going to achieve that.
Georgina, down in Truro, where we're acting for Cornwall County Council, they've set up a separate development company called TRIF, and TRIF can go and get money on the open market, below public works loan books rates, etc., to facilitate effectively what you and I will call council houses. Now, we call them PRS now, etc., but TRIEF are set up to effectively provide council houses, but by a different name.
Yeah,
that's how they're doing it.
Yeah. And lots of housing associations are looking to develop, and we've talked about kind of partnership and collaborations in a different sense, but it comes across all kind of realms, doesn't it? That being in collaboration with others who have the same kind of objectives and goals, but working together to deliver good housing, and doing that collaboratively. So whether it's the local authority, housing associations, private house builders, all working together with a shared vision to deliver more homes, more opportunities, sharing risk and reward and expertise and knowledge is going to be incredibly helpful. So in the same way that we've talked about collaborations, I think in business and office space, it's the same idea, I think, that we can look at partnerships and how we can move, I suppose, residential development forward in a way that allows everyone to hopefully kind of benefit from it in a slightly different way.
Absolutely.
I could agree more. I don't understand, and this is one of the reasons, the intriguing points that we've been working with Cornwall County Council about sort of private PRS and the rest of it, but council housing. At the age of 7, I moved from a house that had been condemned for unfit for human habitation, and we got a council flat. That was put the bunting out. We got a council place, etc. It was not seen as a stigma. It was seen as that's a betterment piece. We've got a council place, etc. We have an indoor toilet, and all of those things. We seem to have lost that over the years, that all of a sudden there's some sort of stigma about council housing and local authority housing. Why can't we provide that back? And, Cornwall has some really progressive ideas about how they can turn that around, etc., for the betterment of people that live, who can't afford, in this instance, to have a house, etc., but provide decent housing at an affordable rent under the umbrella of the county council. That provision piece.
And avoiding that stigma, as you say, Tony, in terms of, the way that I see it and the way that I know lots of developments now go is, you have mixed communities, mixed developments, and that has to be the way forward. Yes. So that you avoid that kind of stigmatization, if that's the right word, of, particular areas. So, yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Fantastic. Well, the title of today's discussion really was Placemaking in Exeter and opportunities and challenges. I think, clearly what the conversation has demonstrated is that there's we're tripping over ourselves, I would say, in terms of opportunities. It feels like there's incredible positivity from all of you about how we can build back better, I suppose, and the opportunities that the city has. Equally, I think with regard to the challenges, what you've said is quality clearly is a very strong plank and will need to be, and how we think about social inclusion and making sure that actually everybody benefits from development in the city, and certainly I think that's one of the very strongest planks of Liveable, is trying to make sure that we do think about every strand of work within the city and make sure that we don't simply deliver outputs. It's not just about houses, it's about homes, it's about communities, and it's about outcomes for people, so that actually people can see the benefit of development and feel that the city is moving forwards in a futuristic way, I suppose, really, building on net zero commitments, thinking about how we can be the very best that the city can be.